So, good afternoon. I'm Paul Flangan. I'm with CreativeMobile. We're a mobile game developer and publisher based in Tallinn in Estonia, established in 2010. We have 100 people. We're 100% self-funded, so pure organic growth story. We've won lots of awards over the years. We've developed and published over 20 titles and have about 350 million players. So we're a very successful indie. But why would Marco choose us or talk about games? And I think the reason is, if you look at the numbers, there's a research company called Newzoo, and they estimate that this year, revenues going through the major app stores will be $45 billion. And of those, 82% are games. So games are sometimes seen as a bit of an odd sector for investment, but it's where the money is. So we operate globally, any market where the app stores are in place, and our segment is high-end multiplayer racing titles. We're competing with the likes of Electronic Arts, Zynga, and we're competing effectively. So how did we get here? There's a title called Drag Racing, and I'd be disappointed if a lot of you guys hadn't actually tried this. The company started out doing casual games. The idea was to write something in a couple of weeks, get it out, have a sequence of games going, and then cross-sell. And this was after the founders had been laid off by a Canadian outsourcing company. So they had no money, no experience really, and they're in Eastern Europe. iPhones were scarce and expensive, but a new handset had come out, which is the Motorola Milestone, which I think was called the Droid in the States. And they thought, we can develop on this. And Google had just implemented its own app store. So they thought, let's go for this, it's less competitive. So that's what we were developing for. The third title which we did was called Basketball Shots 3D. And that started making money. So that allowed the company to scale up a bit. And then they did a fourth title, which is just a straight side-by-side drag racing game. It's called Drag Racing. And they didn't really have any great expectations for it. They released it on a Friday afternoon. They went away for the weekend. And they came back on Monday morning, and everything was just off the charts. The game was just a massive success story. And for its first 2 years, it was doing at least 150,000 downloads a day, purely organic, just from chart position. DAU 500,000, it was top grossing and racing in the biggest markets in the States, and including a couple of spin-offs, SUVs and motorcycles, it's done about 250 million downloads, so pretty successful. Now, if you're investors, you know that the challenge for a game developer is to create the follow-on title. So many don't. And we've managed to do it. It's a game called Nitridation Online. It has the same core loop, which is race, earn money, upgrade. But around it is a much, much more sophisticated engine. It's really a mid-core racing simulation, which is where the market's going. And it hasn't done as many downloads as drag racing did, but the lifetime value for users is at least 4 times what the previous title was. You might also note that the game was launched in April 2014. So again, there's a perception that games launch, peak, and then quickly fall off. But for better game developers, better games, these things can be extended over time. We just launched version 5.02 2 weeks ago. And the game has much, much more functionality than it did when it launched. In fact, it monetizes twice as well as when it launched. The business model we use is the freemium business model. And you might think that it would be quite easy to give games away, and not that hard to make users trade off between time and effort and money. In fact, that's how it all started out, and it was quite simple in the early days. It's not like that anymore. The model now is actually very, very difficult to implement. I won't go through all the details here, but you have to worry about user acquisition, engagement, retention, monetization. There's a lot to it. I'll just pick out a couple of highlights. If we look at user acquisition, it used to be all about getting featured. It used to be that if you didn't get featured, you were dead. Nowadays, featuring's nice, but it's not absolutely necessary. And in fact, a lot of marketing people in mobile companies will say that featuring actually messes up their metrics because the targeting is not so good. Chart position, again, used to be critical to drive organic downloads, and these days it's less so because the app stores have re-engineered the charts, so it's not quite so strong. So how is it that we compete effectively in this complicated market? Well, we have an experienced team. We've got a good brand, licensed lots of cars. We have a great presence on Facebook and Instagram and other social networks. But really the core of it is an analytical capability. In order to pull off the freemium business model, you really need to be able to look in detail at your monetization, the retention, and all other aspects of the business. Another thing you might notice about games these days is that they're not just launched and forgotten. They're not only enhanced, but they have what are called live operations. There might be competitions, might be contests, and you have to have this. This really originated from the Asian market, but is critically important. You'll see it in place in the bigger Western titles. We have licensed some IPs, and again, you'll see that this is a trend with mobile games. You'll see Marvel games, the Star Wars games. We licensed, we worked with an American musician called Fetty Wap. And what licensed IP really helps you with is user acquisition. It doesn't help with anything else, but it helps with that, which is good. But having done this one, we found that we really raised our profile in the United States. And some movie studios and brands have now approached us to work on some of their IP. So where are we going? We're going to continue to focus on the high-end racing titles. Like I said, we're competing with EA and Zynga and others. We're about the only independent still able to operate at that level. Our objective is to hit highest grossing in our category. We've done it before, we can do it again, and that would result in big numbers. We're expanding geographically. So I said earlier that we operate everywhere, that's true, but we operate most effectively in the United States. Remember, the United States is our #1 market, but there are 4 big markets in the world: States, China, Japan, and Korea. And the States isn't the biggest one. China is the biggest one. Japan's pretty well the same size. So we're spending a lot of time on the ground, out there, in the first instance, sorting out distribution and publishing. But on the other hand, that is where the most likely investors or strategic partners are going to be. And finally, we have a game in soft launch in Canada at the moment. It uses a licensed IP, one which a lot of you will recognize. I can't tell you what it is, but you'll probably see it in the market in January. Thanks so much for your attention.